So a ridiculous amount of you have actually shown a ton of interest in how I control the LEDs on my RGB acoustic panels, as well as the cable hider that's under my desk. So I figured, you know what, I should probably go ahead and make a video to show you guys how it's done and how you can use it in your own gaming setup. So I'm going to make a two-part video. This video is going to be the easier solution, the way that you can actually make your own 2-meter strip for your gaming desk setup, and you can make as many of these as you want. But it's going to go over the basics of what WLED is, how you can actually make your strip, and it's going to have a lot of information on making sure that you are using the correct parts, because that is very, very important. The last thing you want to do is go out and buy the wrong LED strip that doesn't match up with the type of power supply that you use. So this video may be a little bit long to some, but please watch the whole video, because it's going to go through detail for everything that you need to know, not just for the beginner video that we're going to do here, but it's going to be part 2 as well for the more advanced section, when you start adding a lot more LEDs, all the way up to being able to run these on the roofline of your house. And I've actually done that too. So hang tight. Let me go over just a few things for you, and we'll get rolling on this. So first thing for this video, we're going to do a quick 2-meter strip that I'm actually going to be using on another video I'm working on right now. That is for my wife's gaming setup, surprise birthday setup. So check out that video as well when you're done watching this. But also, if you run into any problems while you're doing this, I have started a new Discord server. The link is in the description below, as well as all the other materials used for this video. But please join the Discord if you have any questions and you want some help on your own DIY setup, or DIY anything you want to post, you want to flex your setup, whatever the case may be. Please join the community. Again, the link is in the description below. So just a reminder, this is the beginner's guide video, part 1 of part 2, where I talk about more of the advanced stuff. But you want to make sure that you listen to everything that I go into detail on this video, because it will help you out when we're dealing with longer LED strips with power injections, as well as 12-volt power supplies and all that. So make sure you pay attention. And with that being said, let's show you how to make your own custom WLED strip. First, let's talk about the basic components. You have the individually adjustable LED strips, the DC power supply, the ESP8266 or ESP32 development boards, and the WLED firmware that acts as the controller. I'm going to explain what each of these do and the different types of compatibilities they have with one another. We'll start with the brains, the WLED software and the ESP8266 or ESP32 development boards. The ESP8266 and ESP32 modules are open source development boards with built-in Wi-Fi connectivity and are used in a wide variety of DIY projects such as home automation and LED controllers. The ESP8266 and ESP32 are basically the same thing. However, the ESP32 is newer, smarter, and faster, so in this video, we'll be using the ESP32. WLED is a free open source software that we will flash or upload onto the ESP32. The program itself is controlled by the WLED iOS and Android applications you find on your phone. We'll get more into depth on setting this up later in the video, but basically the ESP32 connects to your home's Wi-Fi network, you connect your phone to the same Wi-Fi network, and just like magic, you can then control your LEDs via the WLED app. Now everyone knows what LED strips are, but there's actually a lot of different kinds, types, and styles. There are individually addressable LEDs, also known as digital RGB LEDs, and then there are regular RGB LEDs known as analog LEDs. Analog RGB strips typically have a 4-pin connector and can only control a single color on a strip at any given time. Basically, they're boring, and if you want to control your LEDs with WLED, you'll need digitally addressable LEDs. There are 2 different styles of LEDs you can purchase. There are LED string lights and LED strip lights. Both styles work the exact same way and are compatible with WLED, but today we're going to focus on the LED strip lights. Not all LED strips are compatible with WLED. Luckily for us, you can find out which LED strip types are compatible simply by going to the AirCookie WLED GitHub site. The link to this is in the video description. Here you can see the full list of compatible LED strip types, their voltage, and various other comments. You'll want to do your own research for the individual LED strip types. However, the most common type used is the WS2812B. For most of my projects and in our example today, we'll be using this 5-volt WS2812B LED strip that's 5 meters long and is 60 LEDs per meter. I found these LEDs on Amazon, and by scrolling down, it was very easy to locate the product's description. The key things that you're going to need to look for are the following. First, the type. As you can see, this strip is a WS2812B LED strip and is compatible with WLED. Next, the color order. We'll get to this a little bit later, but you'll need to make sure that you know this when configuring your strips inside the WLED app. Next up, the input voltage type. These light strips require a 5-volt power source. Pretty simple, if your LED strips are 5-volt, you'll need a 5-volt power supply. And if you're using 12-volt LEDs, then you'll need a 12-volt power supply. The IP rating is basically just a measurement of protection that the strips will have against solid objects such as dust, sand, dirt, and liquids. Most commonly, you'll see LED strips for sale with an IP rating of either IP30 or IP65. IP30 would be used in indoor applications where it wouldn't get wet, and IP65 has a layer of silicone surrounding the LED components that protects it from jets of water and can be used outside if installed properly. The total pixel count on a strip is basically showing how close the pixels are to one another. The closer together, the brighter and more blended the lighting effects will have. However, more LEDs also means that it requires more power in the form of wattage or amperage. Probably the most important information you'll need is the LED strip's power consumption, as well as the recommended power supply, if it's there. You'll use these to determine the wattage or amperage you'll need to power the LEDs. Okay, so calculating the size of power supply that you'll need is probably the most confusing part for most people to grasp. But I promise you, it's really not that difficult to do, and I'm going to simplify it the very best that I can for you by breaking it down into individual steps. So, here we go. Step 1, you need to identify how many LEDs per meter that your strip has. Easy enough to do, this should be found right in the LED's product description as shown in our example here. As you can see, there are 300 LEDs every 5 meters, or 16.4 feet. So, with some simple math, 300 LEDs divided by 5 meters equals 60 LEDs per meter. Step 2, identify how many LEDs you'll be using on your project. For this tutorial, I'm going to be installing LEDs around the backside of a desk that's part of a surprise setup overhaul video I'm doing for my wife. The LED strips that I bought are 5 meters long. However, for this project, I'm only going to be using about 2 meters of it. So since I'll be using 2 meters of LED strip and there are 60 LEDs per meter, I now know that I'll have a total of 120 LEDs, and I can move on to step 3, which is identifying the power consumption of the LEDs. Usually, this information will be located in the product's description. In our example, it's shown here and also shows the recommended power supply. However, keep in mind that this recommendation is for the full 16.4 feet, or 5 meters of LEDs. Now, we're only using 2 meters though, so we need to look at the power consumption that is for each individual LED, and that is shown here. For our calculation, we'll use the 0.3 watts per LED because this is the load when at the brightest white. Now that we have the total number of LEDs and we know what the power consumption is per LED, we can just multiply those together to get the total watts. Then to give yourself a buffer, you'll want to follow the 20% rule and multiply this by 1.2, which comes out to 43.2 watts. But power supply wattages come in multiples of 10 watts. So in this case, we'll need to round up and purchase a power supply that's at a minimum of 50 watts. And to get your amperage, you simply just divide your total watts, which is 50 watts, by the LED's input voltage, which is 5 volts, and there you have it. You need a 5 volt 10 amp power supply. DC power supplies come in different output voltages, amperages, and styles. Most common output voltages will be either 5 volt or 12 volt. It's important to match the correct power supply output voltage with the correct LED input voltage. Basically, never connect a 12 volt power supply up to a 5 volt LED strip. Nothing good will come from it. DC power supplies are measured in size by their amps or watts. Different styles of power supplies also matters. There are 3 different power supply styles. There's the wall adapters, power bricks, and metal enclosures. Wall adapter styles are typically used in lower wattage use cases, such as 1 to 2 meter strips. They range anywhere from 1 amp to 3 amps and have barrel connectors at the ends. Power bricks deliver more power than a wall adapter, but they're also a bit bulkier. Their power ranges between 5 amps and 15 amps, and they also have barrel connectors. Metal enclosures deliver the highest wattage, but these are typically hidden out of sight and not to be used in open public areas. So for the RGB LED panel that I have behind me, as well as the cable hider that I have under my desk, I have been using the metal enclosure power supply simply because it's out of the way and it can provide a lot more power than the others, so I can do a lot more with it. However, for this video, we're going to be using a brick power supply, 5 volt 10 amp for the small LED strip on my wife's setup. And now that you've got a better understanding of how it all works, let's go ahead and flash the ESP32 module with WLED and show you how to wire it all up. So what you'll need to do this is you need a USB cable, your ESP32 or ESP8266, and the WLED binary release code. And to get that code, pretty easy. We're just going to open up your browser and go to the AirCookie WLED GitHub repository. For these next steps, you can find these links in the video description below. Once you're there, you'll want to find the latest WLED release, and at this current time, it's 0.11.1. Before we click on that, I want to show you the WLED wiki page. This page gives you a ton of different resources that may be useful, such as this quick start guide that covers the wiring diagram and the initial setup. But for now, we'll go back to the main page again and find the latest release. Click on the latest release and navigate to the correct binary file used for your ESP module. In this case, we're using the ESP32, so you'll want this one. Double-click to download and save to your computer. We'll use this again in just a bit. Now, in order to flash the ESP32 with the WLED binary file you just downloaded, you'll need to download the ESP Home Flasher tool. The link to this again is in the description below. Navigate to the correct download link for your operating system and double-click. Then open up the ESP Home Flasher tool, and then you'll take your USB cable and your ESP32, go ahead and plug it in, and then connect the other end to your computer. Then click on the refresh button here and find your device in the serial port dropdown. If you're not sure which port is the correct port, type in Device Manager in the Windows Start menu, open it up, and find your device under the ports dropdown shown here. Select the correct serial port, then click on Browse and find the WLED binary file that you downloaded earlier. Then select Flash ESP. Let this do its magic, and when it's done, it will display Done, flashing is complete. Okay, so now that you've got it flashed onto your ESP32, the next step is you need to connect to this through your network's Wi-Fi. So what this does is this actually puts out a Wi-Fi signal. Then we need to connect to using either you can do your computer, or I actually find it a lot easier just to use my phone to connect to it. And we're going to program your home Wi-Fi network to this. So the next time it connects, it will be a device that's connected to your home's Wi-Fi network. So you'll need to pull up your phone and jump into the settings. Go into your Wi-Fi settings and connect to the network that says WLED AP. This is the WLED access point. Once connected, the WLED configuration screen will automatically pop up. Go ahead and hit Wi-Fi settings. And then you're going to type in your home's network SSID and password. Then scroll down to the bottom and hit Save and Connect. Now go back to your Wi-Fi settings and connect your phone back to your home's Wi-Fi network. Now you need to download the WLED app from either the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Just search for WLED in the search bar and it should pull up. Once you have it downloaded, go ahead and open it up. Then click on the plus sign in the upper right corner. Now click on the Discover Lights button, and once WLED has found your ESP32 module, it will say Found WLED. Now hit the back button and you should see WLED with the IP number that your network assigned it. So you'll want to take that IP address that your network has assigned to it, and you want to reserve the IP address. What that does is it makes it to where every time your ESP32 module tries to connect to the internet or connect to your home's network, it always will connect to that IP address. Now, this is something I can't actually help you out with. You'll have to just easily jump in and Google how to reserve an IP address for whatever router it is that you have. And I'm sure you'll be able to find some easy instructions on how to do that. But you'll want to make sure you do that, because if you don't, this will randomly change IP addresses. And if it does, then you'll open up the WLED app and it won't try to connect. It'll just say offline. So make sure that you reserve the IP address. We'll mess around with more of these settings after we do the wiring, but first, let's change the name of the ESP32. To do that, just click on where it says WLED, then go to Configuration and then User Interface. Then change the device's name where it says Server Description to whatever you want. Since this strip will be on my wife's new setup, I'm changing it to Wifey LED. Now click Save and go back to the main menu, and it should be changed. We'll mess around with more of these settings after we get it wired and configured, but for now, you can go ahead and disconnect it from the USB cable so it's no longer powered up, and let's show you how to wire it all. So again, this is the basic setup for this easy 2-meter strip. If you want to make your own, links to everything will be in the description below. And I will be doing in my part 2 video a little bit more condensed version of this, but the idea of it is the same. So let's go over everything that we're going to use. So first, you're going to need your power supply. This is a 5-volt 10-amp power supply with the barrel adapter and the terminal connections at the end. You're going to need your ESP32 and your 5-volt LED strips. I've already cut these down to length to 2 meters, so we're good to go. You'll need some jumper wires, a small flathead screwdriver, and some wire strippers. First, we're going to connect the jumper wires to the ESP32. So first, we'll start with the red jumper wire. This is the positive 5-volt wire. You'll connect the female end of your red jumper wire to the VIN pin on the ESP32, like this. Then you'll connect the white jumper wire to the ground pin on the ESP32. This is the negative voltage from your 5-volt power supply. Next, you'll connect the green jumper wire to the pin that says D2 on the ESP32. If you're using an ESP8266, you'll connect it to the D4 pin. This is the data wire. This wire sends a signal to each of your LEDs on your LED strip and tells them what color to turn and when. Now take your wire strippers and cut off the male ends of both the red and white jumpers. Then strip back the sheathing about a 1/2 inch to expose the copper. You technically can also use T-splice connectors here, but I found that they have poor connections, so I just prefer going this route. Once you've got that done, grab your LED strips and strip back the red and white power injection wires the same way. Then twist the red positive voltage wire going to the ESP32 to the red positive voltage wire going to the LED strip. Simply cross them low at the base, pinch them in the middle, and twist until both are wrapped around each other. Then do the same thing with the white negative voltage wires. Now take the end of the green data jumper wire and insert it into the middle slot on the LED strip header, so it connects to the green wire that will send data commands to the individual LEDs. Then take your wire strippers and cut back the red and white power connections so they're only about a 1/2 centimeter long. Then insert the red positive voltage wire into the positive screw terminal on the power supply's barrel adapter connector. Then tighten that down with your small screwdriver and do the same thing with the white negative voltage wire and negative screw terminal. All right, so now let's do a quick recap on how it all works, because unless you know exactly how it works, it really is useless in trying to expand on this for any other project. So let's check this out. You have your power supply outputting a 5-volt positive and negative charge from the end of the terminals. That 5-volt charge is being sent to both the LED strip and the ESP32. Now, even though the LED strip is receiving power, it still doesn't know what color it should be. And that's where the ESP32 comes in. Because now that it's receiving power, it can tell the LED strip what color to change by sending commands through that green data wire. So hopefully that helped make sense of it all. And now we're ready for the moment of truth. Let's plug it in. And there you go. To know that it's working correctly, the first 30 LEDs should glow orange. Now to button it up nice and neat, you can just use a cheap soap dish container to wad up these cables inside it. I cut notches in the ends and I used a hot glue gun to keep the power supply wires in place. So now that you've actually got it all powered up, the next step that you're going to need to do is jump back into the WLED app from your phone. We need to set up a couple of things. As you can see, I have beautifully draped this LED strip across the panel here. And we're going to use that as the example here in a bit. But as you can see also, it's only still doing that 30 LEDs. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that it's going the entire length. And we know how many LEDs there are. So we're going to jump into WLED here and we're going to tell it how many LEDs there are. And to do that, you'll just open up the WLED app again, then go to the WLED lights that you're working on. In this case, it's Wi-Fi LED. Then go to Config in the upper right, and then select on LED preferences. And now just enter in the total LED count of your strip. You'll also want to scroll down to where it gives you the color order. Now remember earlier when I said you would need this? This is where you need to make sure that the correct color order is selected. In this case, it is GRB. So we'll just make sure that we select GRB and then we can go ahead and hit save. As you can see, all of the LEDs are lit, and I think from here you can probably go ahead and just mess around with the WLED app. It's very easy to do. It's got an easy color wheel here, so you can just change it to whatever color you want, drop it, set it, and it goes. Go blue, goes blue. Very easy to do, very intuitive. You can also use a lot of the effects that it has, so if we want to change it to, say, blink, it will blink. Different colors. Or breathe is another one we can do here. And breathe just does exactly what it looks like. You can do candle. I mean, there are tons and tons and tons of these things that you can actually do on here. So I'm going to leave that part up to you, and I'll talk about a little bit more in my next video coming up with the more advanced setup where this is a lot more condensed. I do it a completely different way than this. But this is the easy way to at least get you going and get you familiar with it, and I totally think that you should do it. Also, I do want to kind of call out is I've been getting a lot of questions regarding the effects and everything that I use on my panels here, and to be honest, I just use the original effects that are in the here, just the pre-programmed effects, the way that they work. So, for instance, I'm going to shut this one off and turn the other one on, just like so. And I'll show you. I give you a couple of little different things you can do. So I've got different favorites on here that I've created with the different segments. So I can change it to what I call, this is Cyber Neon that I created. It's just a different color scheme. I've got Cyberpunk. It kind of goes blue and yellow on there. Or you can go pink, blue fireworks. This is the one that you've seen in my videos. So I just use the same presets, but you can use these on all of them. In fact, I'll show you really quick on the power strip, this one. So I'm just going to jump in. We're going to go into effects, and I'm going to go ahead and change this up. We'll do a blue and a red, and then I'm going to jump into the effects here, and change to, let's do fireworks 1D. Now you can see that one strip is doing the same firework effect that the other one's doing. And that's it. Pretty easy. It is not very difficult to do. And I really hope that you guys take this and do and make your own for your own setup. The cost of this is very, very, very cheap. Those ESP32 modules are roughly about around $3 to $5 on the high end for them. The LED strips themselves are about 20 bucks, and then you have to pay, you know, roughly, depending on how much of a power supply you need, it's roughly around 20 bucks or so, give or take, for the actual power strips. Or you can go the way that I did, and you can get the larger power supply, where I can power literally everything. It's about $30 for the metal enclosure that I use, and that powers both these panels and the hider that I have underneath my desk as well. So you can kind of see where you could save a lot of money in going this route rather than paying for the ridiculous amount that say Govee has and all that, and you get very limited control, where this, you have so much control, and there's so much more, trust me, so much more that you can do on this, and it never fails to connect for me anyways. I haven't heard of a lot of people running into that issue, but yeah. So this is the WLED beginner tutorial. Please stand by for the more advanced tutorial that I'm going to go into with segments and 12 volt and making these a lot more modular. Oh, and also, if this is too difficult for you, I highly recommend that you check out Quinn LED. I'm going to put the link in the description below, but Quinn LED makes these very cool, Quinn Dig Uno is what they're called, his own board that he's created. It's very, very neat. They're roughly around 25, I believe, to 45 if you get the additional one. However, or get the 4-channel one. However, those are out of stock very often. I know he's trying to keep up with demand on those, but if this is too complicated, you can always buy your own individual one. It just ramps up the cost. So anyways, we will see you next time. Stay tuned for the next video, and thank you guys so much for watching and supporting my channel and my dream to be able to bring this kind of stuff to you. We'll see you next time.